We are with you one more time, trying to share some ideas and to broaden the discourse around a number of issues. Today, I want to focus on rethinking the concept of nationalism and patriotism. Some recent events, especially in Jamaica, regarding the migration of teachers in the past was largely around nurses and healthcare workers. But circumstances have really shifted. And I think it's necessary for us to take a broader look at this phenomenon. What is behind it? Let us rethink the whole concept of nationalism and patriotism. Can we make sense of this whole process? Huh? Now, one thing that I'm certain of, Jamaicans are a very creative and assertive people. Some even say Jamaican really is a big nation located on a little island. Very special place. Some even say Jamaica is a state of mind. Different things for different people, but what happens in Jamaica impact on many places. I want to also put things in context in terms of this thing called self-preservation. T.F. Hodge defined it as the first law of nature is self-preservation. Cut that off, which may harm you, but if it's worth preserving and it's meaningful, nourish it and have no regrets. Ultimately, this is true living love of self from within. Self-preservation, the first law of nature. Let's put that in the background for this discussion. Huh? Survival. Now, none of us have any control over the place of our birth. But interestingly, when we talk about, well, who am I? Well, I was born in. So how much emphasis do we put on this? You had no control over that. But guess what? How the place of your birth treats you is very important because it will either attract you to it, bond you to it, or repel you from it. Let's use that as part of our framing. How the place of your birth treats you. It was Malcolm X who shared a very important construct that sitting at a table does not make you a diner. You must be eating some of what is on that table. So everyone in the same space don't have the same equal billing. Are you achieving the things that other people in that space are achieving? Very important construct. Now, what I see as the law of life, a child is born. This is the result of an action of a mother and a father, those two individuals. That child had absolutely nothing to do with it, and c'est la vie. Now, the first contact, the parents, they have the minimum responsibility for the food, the protection, the clothing, the shelter, the education, and what I call the positive socialization of that child for at least the next 18 years. So what your parents do to shape you is critical to your very existence. But at a broader level, the state in which you are born has a responsibility for some level of healthcare, education, safety, and security. It will vary from place to place. Richard says safety, opportunity, and inclusion is lacking in our nation. That is so true. Many nations. The state has a secondary responsibility, as we say, for some level of healthcare, education, safety, and security, and for some facility which the citizens can use to fulfill their potential so that they're able to support themselves and their family and thereby strengthen the nation. All right, so the state has something to do with the people who are born there because it benefits them as these people evolve and maximize their potential. If we look at Jamaica, one of the first things that jumps out at me, What does Jamaica have to show for 44 years of devaluation? In 1978, the Jamaican dollar was on par with the US dollar. In 2022, we're now looking at 156 to 1. Are we there yet? Is the model working? There's a debate around this, folks, but there's a reality. 44 years of continuous devaluation. What does Jamaica have to show for this? All right? Put that in the background. After 60 years of independence, Jamaica is now at the top of the homicide rate for the region and the world, at the bottom of the GDP rate for the region, with one exception, Haiti. So Jamaica is not doing very well on the two most critical indices for survival. Not doing well at all. If we go a little further, George Beckford produced a very interesting book years ago called Persistent Poverty, where he looked at, what happens in the kind of plantation economy, persistent poverty and underdevelopment. Now, as Jamaica has emerged during this period of independence, yes, they have created a number of industries have done very well. But the question, where does the profit go? It appears that the profit has gone to a few, and a lot of the profit for the major industries go out of Jamaica. So it doesn't build Jamaica, and in terms of the majority of the people of Jamaica do not benefit from the profit of their creative capabilities. Now, where and how you live as an individual, it should be by a conscious intention and desire, because we start with the premise that where you're born is totally accidental. How the place in which you are born treats you will either attract you to it or repel you from it. So individuals have to evaluate their options, evaluate the odds of success in any place that you're living. Anywhere that you are and you are not free to leave is by definition a prison. So that if you live in a particular country, you evaluate your probability of success. How can you be successful in that area? Okay? It will make you want to stay or make you want to go. But if you are not free to go if you wish to, you're technically in prison. And there are a number of such countries in the world that people aren't allowed to leave. If you look at the path that the Jamaican society has taken from the slave plantation to being a colonial outpost, then to what we now call independent Jamaica, what we see is that a small minority have created a Jamaica in which they are prosperous and safe. They are prosperous and safe. There are some Jamaicans who have done very well right through slavery, colonization, and over the last 60 years. But each one of us must evaluate our own odds of survival and becoming prosperous and safe. Everyone who lives in Jamaica now has to do that same thing. What are your chances of becoming prosperous and living a safe life? What are the options? Recently, I had a discussion on the internet via Twitter, and a prominent Jamaican raised the question about why we are not seeing more, mass protests and so on if things are supposed to be so bad in Jamaica. But then I pointed out to him that, look, we really have two options, We can find a way to join those who are prosperous and safe, or we can find a way to displace them. Now, if you're having a problem with either of these, then something else happens, Mass demonstration or mass migration. Which one? Which one do we use? You remember that back in the 70s, this famous statement that there are 5 flights a day for those who do not like conditions in Jamaica? But guess what? We now have more than 5 flights a day. Way more than that. And interestingly, the amygdala equips us to fight or flee. That critical function of the brain equips us to fight or flee. It appears that more and more Jamaicans have made a decision that, listen, they don't see a point to having demonstration and fighting when the options are there to flee. The brain gives you that capability. The new work order, which I've been studying and talking about for the last 25 years, is now at another level, folks. The new work order has continued to evolve. Globalization has unleashed an enormous power via transnational corporations. They answer to nobody because they can move easily around the world, move their productive capacity across any national boundary, whichever one gives them the most profit. This reduced the impact of individual governments on their actions. But guess what? We all now have another level at this process. Workers are now able to have the similar kind of leverage. Did you ever believe that the individual worker could almost get that same kind of power? Well, I say yes. Workers now have that same kind of power. Why do I say that? We now have the rise of what I call the nomads. See how we spell that? KNOWMADS. Who are these? Knowledge workers whose skills and capability can be applied across national boundaries. They can work anywhere because the skills are marketable. Interestingly, at the top of this league are what I call the digital nomads. Who are they? People who can live anywhere and work online anywhere. They can provide the same level of geo-arbitraging. If you're not familiar with that word, please look it up. Where you look at the differential of exchange rate and cost of living across areas. And you can see now, by you living in one place and working in another, you can extend your financial capabilities incredible. So that if you can live in a hard currency, the US currency area, but then you have expenses in a place that the dollar is 156 to 1, you can have a much better quality of life. So nomads and digital nomads have risen to the top of the heap of the workers' pile. If all you do, you can only work physically one place at one time, you're at the bottom of the pile. Where are teachers and nurses? Teachers and nurses are nomads. Teachers and nurses are knowledge workers whose skills can be presented, utilized, traded anywhere. Okay. Let's go one step further in this discourse. We now have the politics of differential fertility rates. You see how many constructs that we're looking at here now? Birth rate looks at the total number of births in a year per 1,000. But more accurately is the concept of fertility rate. That's the total number of births in a year per 1,000 women in the reproductive age of that population. If you don't include migration, any society needs an overall fertility rate of above 2.1 in order to keep the population stable. Now, why is that necessary? What's important about that? If your fertility rate drops below 2.1, you aren't able to replace your productive workforce. You have a workforce that is now aging because they are demanding more services, they can do less to produce in the society, and it's costing the society more. So societies who have declining fertility rate really have to do something to attract workforce from other areas if they can't reverse the trend and increase their fertility rate. So if we look at our situation, what are we seeing? Jamaica fertility rate has dipped below the 2.1. So that, yes, some problems are ahead for Jamaica. But the countries that Jamaicans are attracted to all are in the dangerous zone with their fertility rate. The US is at 1.78, the UK 1.75, and Canada is now down to 1.47. What does this mean? It means that these societies are in a serious developmental, economic productivity crunch. They need to attract viable workforce, and they need to draw them as quickly as possible because they cannot sustain themselves with this level of decline. Where will they draw these people from? I give you 10 guesses. How about places like Jamaica? Places like Jamaica. Jamaicans have demonstrated their capability, their ability in terms of almost any area of expertise. You travel across the US, almost any hospital you go into, huh? The doctors, many of the nurses were trained in Jamaica, were born from Jamaica. And there's a constant flow, hundreds each year. It's going to get greater. Now, story has come to bump now. When you look at what is happening now in Jamaica now with COVID and the pressures on the educational system and no change in the remuneration, the living condition of teachers, not to mention nurses, we're going to have even greater outward migration as a result of the push from Jamaica and the pull from the USA, the United Kingdom, and Canada. That explains the nature of the issue, people. That's why we're in this conundrum. I had a wonderful conversation a couple of years ago with John Issa, and this was a quote from him. Our people all came from somewhere else to Jamaica. The question, where is it written that Jamaica should be the last stop? Jamaica is a nation of migrants. Whether it's going to the Panama Canal to build it, whether it's going to UK, Windrush, whether it's going to America and Canada as farm work, whether it's moving out as teachers and as nurses, that process has always been there. But now it is on steroids. It is on steroids because living condition in Jamaica for the majority of Jamaicans has not kept pace in any way whatsoever with people's expectations and what they see happening in the rest of the world. And the ones who can leave will certainly do so. Matthew 13:57 says, and they were offended in him. But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor save in his own country and in his own house. Huh? Guess what? In Jamaica, competent professionals are often paid less than expatriates for doing the same jobs. I can see that we're on the fear of contradiction. But when those Jamaicans migrate, they are highly respected and appropriately compensated. Yes, folks, Jesus tells us that there will be days like these, and we are now seeing this reality. We are now seeing this reality. Jamaicans are also seeing that, look, there are a significant skill shortage in various sectors of the US economy. Nurses and doctors is only one. We're talking about teachers now, but guess what? Tradesmen. Do you know what tradesmen earn in the US? You call a plumber to fix a pipe in your house. You call a carpenter to put up some shelves in your house. You need some big bucks. Let us add to that engineers and architects and IT specialists and financial analysts telecom specialists and marketing personnel. These are all significant skill shortage area. So what Jamaica is now experiencing with teachers and nurses, you multiply that by 10 as we go further on, because as I mentioned, the issue of the fertility and birth rate differential gap. So we have some work ahead. And my belief is that I think we're going to have to find a way to cope with this. And one of the most important coping strategy for me with this, I'm going to just drink water and mind my business. This is where we are, folks. Now, I see some comments here that we use. Milton said, what about those situations so dire that they have literally given up, as it were? Was there enough social intervention by the powers that be to assist? I think it's kind of late for that. Because look, the data over the years has shown us that the more educated Jamaicans are, 50% of Jamaicans who have college educations, their aspiration is migration. 50%. It's a little less with those with just high school education, and it's a little less with those with minimal education, because as your aspiration increase and your education increase, you realize the differential in terms of what you are compensated. Somebody says, thanks for sharing that information on birth rate. It's a conversation information that needs to be shared. Yeah, I give thanks for that. Cecilia, then it seems that there's also a great opportunity for Jamaicans to get the house in order to attract people coming from those looking for a place. Absolutely. No, but guess what? A lot of persons are coming from other areas, especially say India and China. A lot are coming to Jamaica, but guess what? It is a way of getting to the United States. For many of them, they're coming to Jamaica, fine-tune their English, and then the idea is to move on to the US because they don't plan to stay for long in Jamaica. They don't plan. Carry on. It's always so disappointing to see how Jamaicans going elsewhere to fill the gaps of other cultures. And those of us who want to come back home and fill the gap at home face so much fight against and bad mind. You are so correct, Carry on. Jamaicans returning, to Jamaica come under a lot of pressure because a lot of people misunderstand, and they see you coming back and they believe that, listen, you have everything. And oftentimes you become a target in the communities that you wish. But many Jamaicans, the average Jamaican who migrates, because the love you have for that place in which you were born, the love you have for that Jamaican culture, and part of it wants to come back home. In the United States, back in the 70s and so on, when that Bob Andy song played, I gotta go back home. The song is singing about Africa, but when Jamaicans in New York and in Florida sung that song at parties, it was going back home to Jamaica. But the reality, many Jamaicans who came to the United States for economic reasons, intending to go back to Jamaica, over time, they've come to realize it's hard to do that. It's very hard to do that. All right. So this is where we are, folks. The differential in the fertility rate has really put the issue on steroids. So we really have to start understanding what we're up against. And it's kind of late for the government to start trying to look at this, trying to stem this. And I really don't see them having the will because, look, for so long, so few have benefited from what life in Jamaica can be and should be. So we have some rough times ahead. So what I'm going to do, I trust you do the same. Drink water and mind your business, huh? Remember when we said that self-preservation is the first law of nature. What can you do to save yourself? What can you do to save yourself? Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful day.